Welcome to a new video series, a retreat migraine video series about some of the supporters of retreat migraine. We are going to be doing interviews with people who offer products or services that help people with migraine, and also we're going to be talking to authors of books about migraine.
Great. And so today's topic is a trend that we see happening in migraine more broadly, which is really less of a focus on triggers and things that people with migraine can't or shouldn't do, but an increased focus on protectors. And what are the healthy lifestyle habits that improve the quality of life and improve the ability to manage migraine disease?
And as we always say in these videos, nothing works for everyone, but everything seems to help or work for someone. And so we encourage you to look into the products and the items that we share in these videos.
I'm Eileen Brewer, and I am the director of Retreat Migraine and the director of special events for the Coalition for Headache and Migraine Patients.
And I'm Kevin Lenneberg, the executive director of CHAMP.
And I am Shoshana Lipson. I am the sponsorship coordinator for Retreat Migraine.
And I am Dr. Caryn Seebach. I am the head of programs for Ctrl M Health, and I am a health psychologist and pain psychologist.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'll kick it off with the first question, which is, you've been working in this area, working with people with migraine for many years. What is it we know so far about which behaviors are most helpful for managing migraine disease?
That's a great question. And so I think it's helpful to set up the answer to this question by really understanding first and foremost triggers, which, as you said, we really are there's another side to that coin that we're trying to focus on. But I do think there's some misconception and misunderstanding sometimes around triggers that can be helpful to understand to really set it up for, okay, what are the things that you can control? And on this topic, I find it really helpful to refer to the bucket metaphor. So the idea that every person with migraine has a bucket, and in that bucket are all these factors that include their behaviors, it includes lifestyle factors, it includes genetics and neurobiology. And in that bucket, the things they do every single day and who they are is also things that sensitize the person with migraine to migraine attacks. And it's usually things that might be, again, lifestyle choices like food choices, let's say, or environment. But there's a huge chunk in that bucket that is not in the person's control. Genetics is a huge one. Migraine is a complex neurological disease, first and foremost. So genetics play a huge component of that, and as does biochemistry. But these other things in the bucket can sensitize someone to migraine attacks or perpetuate them. And that's where I like to focus on with people, what is in your control? The thing I say to everyone is you could do absolutely everything right and you could still get a migraine attack. So it's really important to take blame out of this and shame out of this, but understand that with time, with practice, with consistency, you can figure out the lifestyle choices that support you or perpetuate migraine. So along those lines, there's a few that we know, a few categories that we know can be really helpful to support someone with migraine. One helpful acronym is SEEDS, and that stands for sleep, exercise, eating, diary, and stress. And if helpful, I can unpack those a little bit further.
Yeah, I say go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So sleep is particularly important. It actually has been shown to be as important as movement and nutrition combined. So I always like to start with sleep because, the person with migraine has limited energy. They have to be very judicious about what they focus on. And so sleep to me is always low hanging fruit. If we address sleep problems, and often migraine can be the cause of those problems, but if we can really focus on them and focus on the things that are in the person's control, we can actually reduce migraine from chronic to episodic. That's been shown again and again. Exercise can really be a double-edged sword. It's something that many people with migraine are afraid of for good reason, because initially it can exacerbate migraine. But we do know with time and consistency, it can end up reducing migraine. And so I always talk about pacing with people. Start with 2 minutes a day. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be exercise, I believe. It can be any kind of movement. Walking to the mailbox, that counts. Every little bit counts. Gentle stretching, that counts. Building yourself from 1 minute a day, adding a minute every day. The goal, which shows to be the most benefit, is 30 to 60 minutes, about 3 to 5 times a week, but starting small. Then we move on to eating. Eating is a tough one. It probably is the most individualized area, and there is no specific diet for migraine. But what data does support is that a diet that focuses on anti-inflammatory foods, so low in processed foods, more of a Mediterranean diet, that can be universally helpful, although there's a lot of variation with that. So it really, this is where diary comes in, and can be helpful to understand patterns. And a diary really can be for nutrition. It could be for movement. It could be for tracking migraine attacks. The whole point of a diary really is, as you know, it's just to understand patterns and understand your individualized needs. And tracking can be a huge component, especially early on in managing migraine. And then finally, we have stress. We know that stress is highly correlated with migraine, but I also find that it can be oversimplified. I think people with migraine are often told, oh, it's because of your stress that you have migraine. That's a huge oversimplification. Really, what happens is that stress, no matter how we define it, whether it's traffic or managing a very complex neurological disease like migraine, it ramps up the nervous system. And unfortunately, migraine is very sensitive to changes in the nervous system. So we know that stress is correlated because of that reason. And it's also very closely tied to psychological health. And I think those two concepts can be conflated sometimes. So what we want to do is understand, what does stress mean to that person, really taking stock of what it means for you. And that may include anxiety, or that may include feeling hopeless, or it may include, everyday stressors that you have to manage. The goal isn't to get rid of those things, because it's not necessarily realistic. The goal is instead to have coping tools so that you have it doesn't have you. And then I would add one last thing I think is really important for supporting these behaviors that help migraine is connection. We know that people who are connected to meaningful people and things that bring them a sense of purpose do better, not just with migraine, but with health overall. And unfortunately, migraine is a highly stigmatized disease, and it tends to isolate people. It tends to make them very lonely. And so it can really perpetuate and worsen the process. So it's something I always talk about with my clients, which is, what are the things that we can connect you to that bring meaning and purpose in spite of migraine?
Great, thank
So
you.
you touched on this a little bit while you were talking. Why is it so hard to change these behaviors? I mean, you laid it all out there like this is simple. Here are the steps to make your life better. But we all know that it's not that simple. Like the first one, sleep. I'm a parent, and like I have little kids, and so sleep on a regular basis isn't really a reality for me. But what other things make it difficult for people to change their behaviors to be more healthy overall, and to help reduce their number of attacks?
Yes, that's a really good question. And you're right. It is extremely difficult. Often people know what to do, right? It's not a knowledge deficit. It's usually being able to do it in a way that's sustainable and manageable. So there's a couple reasons, a couple layers as to why it's so hard. The first one is that the brain resists change. From an evolutionary perspective, it's the riskier choice. If the brain likes predictability because if it knows what's coming, it's going to increase our chances of survival. So, change, even positive change, wakes up the limbic system, which is that alerting system of our brain that's constantly attuned to threat. And another layer of this is that the preference for predictability also includes our reward system. So, for example, if we know that watching TV on the couch or eating that bowl of ice cream will make us immediately feel good, it's that much harder to convince the brain that getting up and exercising or swapping out that ice cream for vegetables will also feel good, especially when that gratification is delayed. So, this really highlights why motivation can be so difficult to maintain, even in the best of circumstances. Um, and as we all know, change requires effort. And that's really because it uses the executive functioning of our brain, that's just the decision making parts of our brain, which requires cognitive effort through conscious attention. So, the demands that any person has on their attention, the more this sense of effort increases. And you might imagine where I'm going with this. In the best of circumstances, that's the case. If you are managing an unpredictable, painful neurological disease like migraine, those are demands on attention. That's even more effort. So it can feel very overwhelming or out of reach without the right tools to be able to break it down. And there are ways to do that, but we just have to understand what are the barriers. And then finally, I think just from an environment standpoint, we live in a go big or go home kind of culture, just do it. And in anyone with migraine has experienced that feeling of just having to power through a migraine attack out of necessity. So there's this conditioning piece that happens that focusing on maybe the small or tiny incremental changes means that we're either weak or we're messing it up or doing it wrong. So taken together, I think this makes behavior change really daunting and why every single person feels like it can be very overwhelming without the right tools.
Yeah, and that sense that I think you exactly hit on the head that I've got to change everything. And when that is so daunting, I'm not going to change anything. Instead of saying, what are the small incremental improvements in one area, make one change, or make a small change in a number of areas. It's not like night or day, but just they accrue over time. They build on each other, and that's opportunity there.
Absolutely. I love the fact that right at the start, you talked about blame and shame. And we hear that from so many people. I know I experienced that myself. This sense that we're being blamed for the fact that we have this complex neurological disease that we just can't seem to get under control a lot of the time. And then the shame that comes along with that. And then I think, added into the fact about talking about changing behaviors, I know for myself, I have all the best intentions. I get into an exercise program, I eat healthy, I sleep, and then wham, an attack comes that I just can't stop. And, and it can derail me for a week or sometimes even more than that. And then you're thinking, oh, now I'm just back to square one again. And so it's really hard because you get motivated, you feel great about yourself, you do something, and then an attack happens out of your control anyway, like you mentioned. And so I'm just wondering, what do we know about what is helpful in supporting people as we work to change habits and be healthier, bearing in mind that we carry this weight of shame and blame from not being able to be better, and bearing in mind, like you said, the unpredictability and the fact that our plans get derailed through no fault of our own.
Absolutely. You astutely brought up blame and shame, and it really feeds into how we can support people as they work to change habits. The thing that I probably talk about most with my clients, and I sometimes get a lot of pushback on this, is this notion of self-compassion. It is through no fault of your own or any person with migraine that they have to manage this. And frankly, individuals with migraine I've seen firsthand are some of the most compassionate, kind, thoughtful, giving people on the planet. And In turn, what can happen is because the individual with migraines trying to manage so much and trying to also function and, parent or work or be a spouse or a friend, all of these things combined, they can get deprioritized, right? If you think about how you have to prioritize your energy. And so self compassion, it just means including yourself in kindness. And self compassion is one of the most important ways I think that an individual can be supported with migraine, and others around them can reinforce this notion of self compassion, including yourself in kindness, meeting yourself exactly where you are. So when inevitably there are setbacks, it's rather than that drill sergeant kind of metaphor of just like power through it, get up, get going, get moving, which is well intentioned. It's intended to motivate, but you run out of gas. It's not sustainable. The antidote to that is meeting yourself with kindness and meeting yourself exactly where you are, which takes a lot of practice. It really does, for even compassionate people. It is a work in progress forever. And that's why practicing it again and again can be really helpful. And the people around you can support you and reinforce you by reminding you how important it is. So I always start there. Self compassion is one of the most important ways we can support someone with migraine. Also, I truly believe it takes a village. One of the hardest things to do is to ask for help for lots of good reasons. Again, it's a very misunderstood disease. People don't get it, often think it's just a headache, you're not doing something right. And so I think lots of individuals with migraine have been conditioned to not ask for help for good reason. And at the same time, it's a necessity. So I try and work with people on, not one person can be all things, right? You might have to sort of navigate people's strengths. And so the person that might be really helpful in a last minute need, right? Like picking your kids up from school or helping you prepare a meal. Maybe they're not the best with emotional support, right? Maybe that's a different person that you go to for that emotional support, and understanding, who in your life you can ask for help and what are their strengths, and playing to that, I think, is helpful, because again, it takes a village. And then lastly, I would say what we've talked about: make the bite small. If the change is so tiny, like we talked about, 1 minute of exercise adding on every day, or focusing on, one thing you want to add into your life, like maybe that's a bedtime routine, and you just focus on that for weeks to months if needed. When you make the bite small, the limbic system doesn't wake up. The alerting part of the brain doesn't know it's happening, so it can't fight you so hard and come up with all these reasons why you shouldn't be doing it.
I love that. And I think Shoshana, to your point about how an attack is sometimes you have that plan, even if it's just adding that 1 minute, but in the midst of an attack, 1 minute of exercise may be too far. So being willing to
Mhm.
have that self-compassion and say, okay, in light of what I'm experiencing today, what is that step that's better than not? And it might be not be 1 minute of exercise. It may be 1 minute of gratitude or something, just so you keep a little bit of that forward progress. So, Dr. Seebach, you're with a new company in this space called Ctrl M Health. Can you tell us about that and how what they're offering connects with these issues we've just been talking about?
Absolutely. So, Control M Health, we are a digital health company. And what we're trying to do is we're seeking to centralize resources and fill a gap in migraine care. So, we really wanted to take the burden out of understanding and implementing the lifestyle changes that are most impactful for the person with migraine. So, to this end, our company has a three-pronged approach. We have, first and foremost, a free knowledge portal that provides access to over 70 evidence based and medically reviewed articles that span a vast array of topics, from what is migraine to managing shame and guilt with migraine. So there's a little something there for everybody. And we're constantly updating that. so that all the topics are relevant. We also have a line of evidence-based nutritional supplements, which are designed by headache specialists and are analyzed for safety and purity so that people know exactly what they are taking and how it is designed to help their migraine. Because we know that supplements are actually evidence-based for migraine, very specific ones, but there was a lack in being able to have that regulated and quality. So we tried to fill that gap. And then finally, we have an app, which is a personalized, guided approach to help people build these healthy lifestyle habits that we've been talking about, to create routines that last and that are known to reduce the impact of migraine. So we know that there are a lack of headache specialists. And even if you do have one, getting to one can be extremely difficult. So we wanted to be able to have individuals have a companion tool that supports them in between their visits, and that's at their fingertips, that can work around their lifestyle and basically work with their migraine.
Okay. I think a lot of people hearing this will be like, "Oh, it's an app. I've tried an app before." A lot of them are the migraine tracking apps. Can you just sort of
Yes.
drill down in what ways your app is similar and different to some of those other apps that many people have tried?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's some great trigger tracking apps out there. And we didn't come in to disrupt that scene. If anything, we are hoping to complement it, because we find that tracking is so important, as we've mentioned, for people to start to put the pieces together. But in my work and working with headache specialists, I think part of what we see is that it's really the time in between visits where people know what to do, but are managing so much. And part of my job as a pain psychologist is to help people implement those changes. But I can only be with a person 1 hour a week at best. And there's just a lack of providers. So what we saw was this gap beyond trigger tracking, that is a companion, so that when you try to figure out, okay, what do I need to change once I've identified those factors? Now, how do I go do it? And what are the things that are most evidence based for migraine specifically? This app is 100% migraine centric. Everything is about how to improve migraine. And then the behavior lifestyle changes that we talked about, we directly address those barriers. And the benefit of an app is that it is really right there for you. It's at your fingertips, so you can use it in the moments that work for you. Um, in between those visits, as we talked about. So we're hoping to be a complement to, I think, some of the great resources that are already out there, and frankly, centralize it in one place, because the burden is often on the person. Even if they are lucky enough to have a great provider who might say, try yoga, try mindfulness, try relaxation training, don't forget about connection. That person has to go and piece all that together for themselves, when energy and time is very precious. We wanted to make it all in one place to take that burden off the individual.
I love the fact that this is an app that is designed specifically for migraine, because there are so many apps out there to do with behaviors and lifestyle that are not specifically for migraine. And so you come to something, you think, well, I can't do that, or this doesn't work for me. And then, like you say, I know on my phone, I have so many different lifestyle apps. It is overwhelming. I look at them, I just, that creates stress. And then I think I'm not going to do anything. But I did want to ask something about your app, because I know when I tried it, I'm definitely an overachiever. So I looked at it and I thought, oh, wow, this looks good. And oh, that looks good. And that looks good. And I set up all my notifications for every aspect of it. And then, of course, it was overwhelming. So I'm thinking, oh, this doesn't work for me, because I did something that was not the smartest thing, just because I'm an overachiever. And so I like the fact you said earlier, to take things in bite-sized pieces. And I'm presuming that also holds true for your app. Like, some people may be able to do the whole thing all at once. Other people, it's really important just do one thing at a time. Set up one notification a day, not like 20 notifications for all the different aspects. I see Kevin laughing at me. And other people who know me will say, yeah, I bet she did do that. But maybe you could just speak a little bit into the different aspects that your app covers and how we can take bite-sized pieces of that to help ourselves manage it.
Excellent. Yeah. Shoshana, I love that you were able to pick up on the fact that, that's part of your process, and maybe that wasn't serving you, and to take a step back. So, it is a process, and we hope that people, the one thing about the app is there is a lot of information in there. So what we want to do is really encourage people to take it in small chunks. We try to, as much as you can individualize an app, we recognize it's never going to replace the provider connection or that person to person connection. But what it can do ideally is personalize it in a way that it works for you. So we have a survey when you onboard. You might have seen that, Shoshana, that asks you different questions about your lifestyle, about your migraine, about psychological health, and it comes up with a wellness plan that gives very specific recommendations for every aspect of the app for different areas like connectedness or movement or core health, which is sleep, nutrition, and hydration. So it will give you very specific recommendations to make the bites small and to take it at your own pace. Every single module within the app is designed to be consumed in at minimum a 1 week process, but we encourage people to take weeks to months with even maybe someone spends weeks to months just in nutrition, or just in movement. And so what we try to do is make this a personalized process, but we recognize it's also going to be a little bit of trial and error.
I like that it can be personalized. I've done other apps that weren't migraine specific, that were meant to improve my health and exercise and whatever. But what I found was that it was like, okay, I just spent 30 minutes a day on my phone just doing this app. And I was like, I don't want to spend 30 minutes a day on my phone just doing this app. So being able to reduce the amount of time that I have to interact with an app while still getting benefit sounds like a really great idea. I have a question. So your app right now is only on iPhones, right?
It is
Do you
only
have plans to bring it to Android?
actively, yes. So our goal is to, by hopefully early 2021, bring it to Android, because we realize we're missing like 50% of the population, which is a big stat. So we are actively in the works.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I just got to
Good
say,
question.
I really loved your comment where you said, self-compassion means bringing the kindness that so many people with migraine show to others and applying it to yourself. And I think that's the overarching thing. And it's amazing that this new resource exists, a new tool to help people on that journey. And that really it is. It's those bite-sized bits. Just saying, bring that focus to yourself, the kindness, and saying, I'm going to make that incremental progress over time, and having a new resource that can be my partner on this journey, keeping me, on track. So thank you for joining us for this discussion today. Really enjoyed talking with you. And we certainly will be helping to spread the word once it's more widely available. But if you have an iPhone, we encourage you to check it out now, and we'll let everyone know once it's out on Android as well.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
having me.
Got it.